Thank you all for having patience with this series. I know it's taken a little bit of time. And thank you to everybody who tuned in for Nate's debut of his 1648 Low John boat. But as Nate was on his mission with that build, I'm on my own mission here to finish what I started. The objective is that we're going to make this boat, this Lund, the baddest 14-foot V-hull on the planet, or we're going to die trying. Right here you're going to see a preview of the deck. We have a full decking video coming up after this video, but before that, we have to show you what we had to do before we attach the deck. Here comes the foaming process. The foaming process for this boat was pretty extensive. This is how foam works. So initially, your boat without any foam relies on displacement, meaning its actual size needs to meet a certain weight or it just doesn't sink in the water. So that's what you have going for you until you don't. So if you ever get any sort of puncture in the bottom and your boat starts filling up with water, or if you get rained out or caught in a storm and your boat fills up with water, your displacement goes down the tubes and so does your. But people who figured out this displacement problem figured out ways to displace the actual space in the boat so the water, no matter how much gets in there, cannot overtake all of the boat to where it would actually sink. Foam is able to do this because next to having pockets of air in your boat, foam is several times lighter than water itself. So if there are spaces in the boat with a density that is way lighter than water itself, then where's the water going to go? No matter how much water gets in the actual boat, it becomes unsinkable because the sheer amount of water cannot get into the boat and overpower the displacement value. Every boat should have foam inside of it, or it's just an accident waiting to happen on the water. And with this boat, I'm not just trying to keep it safe. I'm building it for f***ing war. So in previous videos during the framing stage, we poured an initial layer of 2-part polyurethane pour foam underneath because we ran drainage tubes directly to the subfloor. And because of that, we were able to put pour foam around the drainage tube, so we had all that foam in sitting there with ways for the drain to flow out. And we also stuck tubes everywhere which way in the fourth. This is why I chose to adopt pour foam. For a long time I told my audience to stay away from it because every time I gutted a boat, I had giant horror stories of 50 and 100 pounds of pour foam just stacked in boats from saturated water. But I realized that's mainly because where was the water going to run from? These boats weren't, either there wasn't enough inside or they simply didn't care. But I care. So I'm going to show you a way to drain the water effectively and still have this amount of foam in your boat so you can avoid saturation and you can keep the longevity of your boat so it'll last for years to come and ultimately keep you very, very safe. Now we ran the conduits right there. We sealed it off with quad foam off there, and all the other edges sealed off with quad foam. So the rest of this is just going to fill in with pour foam. But I want to make an additional conduit just so later on if he wants to run a fish finder somewhere he can. I also have to make a few brackets to make a complete wall so I can pour the rest of the foam in and it won't overflow into the actual deep stow. This is 2-pound density pour foam, and I've gotten questions about 4 and 6 pound pour foam. Just know that that gives the same amount of expansion but weighs more. So you want the amount of displacement you're having from this fill of foam to weigh as little as possible, because that's where you're going to get the most reserve buoyancy from. That we are going to need a hole saw big enough, or just big enough. Like this one would be more appropriate. We want it just big enough. If he wants to run extra pumps or run a fish finder, he's going to need a pretty big conduit that'll fit kind of fish finder type cable heads. So that's what we're giving this one, and we're going to have end caps to cap it off. And if he ever wants to access it, he just has to open a few panels and run wires. Because if we poured foam in it just like that, the foam would seep into the cracks and cause problems. So we're sealing with quad foam. This is closed cell spray foam you can get from any hardware store, and we're spraying it right around the crevices there. And that's really just so when we do pour the pour foam in, it's not going to seep into those crevices and cause more problems. All right, now that looks trashy down there, but we're going to clear all that out so it doesn't look that way. But we definitely need it sealed off before we pour the extra foam, or it'll just be a nightmare. Because it's important to have drainage, foresee it puddling up there. It just needs to have its additional runoff source. So I'm going to try and give it its source. Notice when you pour foam in that it mushrooms up. It looks like a mushroom, meaning that has the highest point and then it sinks down lower. So if you put tubes on the side and you have it on the true side, you pour foam in, then it will always have a lower point. And then you just cut the tubes at the lowest point of where the pour foam starts to round and mushroom, and water will drain down into those low pockets. And it'll just bleed out all the water, if water ever gets in there to begin with. At the expansion part, here you can see where it starts to mushroom out and the low end sinks there. The water will sink right into that pocket if you don't have anything to drain it out. Bare area. The best stuff that I had was this flex conduit tubing. And you can get this stuff at the hardware store, or it's the same stuff that you use for bilge, like through-hole fittings. Right here, because of just how inexperienced I am with this stuff, I do know that the more you pour in at one time, the better expansion rate you get. So if you pour in a little bit, don't expect for it to span a whole lot, but the more you get together, the more energy it collects, the hotter because it's kind of it's a two-part resin mix that turns into this expanded foam. Okay, so this is really what I feared. It just looks like a big giant butt. The worst thing is it has the crack. We have to fill that and kind of layer so it kind of bubbles up, and we don't have anywhere where it's going to seriously catch in there because we don't want water to pit right in there. So this just sucks. But we're going to try and counter it. And we still have the quad foam to fill in any serious gaps that are just unrealistic for us to pour into. So a little bit there. I did already start to pour here. And I threw a bunch of extra foam that overlaid when I did the subfloor. I threw it in there because it's all the same. When I put all the foam in there, it'll all solidify, and that'll just offset for the gap. Because I'm going to have just enough foam to pull this off. And that was like 2 kits, $200 worth of foam. Barely enough to pull this off, but when we do it, I know this will be solid. It'll be the perfect thing to do. So this is inevitable. Your cup will eventually corrode with foam, but if you're careful enough, let it thick enough, it will let you pull it out. And you can find these anywhere. I have these on my store in the link in the description below, and I also have you can find these at Lowe's. Everything all day. You can find these at Home Depot. The mixing cups right in the paint section. If I could do it all over again, I would have mixed 80 ounces, 50-50 split in one big mixing bucket and poured it in. That way it would have given me one nice solid mushroom and it wouldn't overlap like what it's doing now. This is going to give me problems. I'm going to have to fix it. The lighter foam is the quad foam that I use to fill in the gaps. And so it's it's fairly okay. We do have bleed-offs, so just in case this does get over power water, it will have bleed-offs. It shouldn't, though. We're going to do things to try and avert that. We're going to add some more framing in here as well. This side, same thing. Some of this stuff came out a little sketch, but right at the very end. It's still curing. We'll figure out this. Sections that needed foam to level it out, so we got most of it. It's not a perfect level. I think to get a perfect level, you'd need a spray machine. I did level it as best I possibly could, fill up any gaps so water could seep in there and eventually create long-term damage. And once the stuff cures, we'll be able to cut the hoses right level with the foam, and those will be the bleed-offs for any serious water coming in. I mean, I don't think a whole lot of water is going to get in there to begin with, but if it does, at least we'll have a plan B for each spot. There's spots everywhere we poured that have bleed-offs. Here we have a set of 14 gauge marine grade duplex here, and that's for the rear LED. We already have the other wires connected to this LED for the nav lights. So go over like so. And we'll have to have a special bracket kind of come up here. And we'll be doing that later also. I'm going to show you how that's going to be done. It'll be pretty cool. Well, that was more foam than the boat had into it to begin with. The frame is way lighter than it was. The subfloor is a million times lighter than it was. The only thing I would have done differently is get a bigger mixing cup. I would have poured 60 to 80 ounces, which is, half and half, 30-30 or 40-40. and then I would just pour it in there. Probably could have gotten more expansion with less of the product and had a more perfect mushroom, and then instead of having to fill in all those gaps and re-pour, that was pretty annoying. Plus, if you just have to re-pour a little bit, you only get a little bit of expansion. The stuff just operates much better. It's 2-part polyurethane pour foam from Total Boat. That's the stuff that I use, the stuff that's been recommended to me. Definitely bulk is better. The finished product is better if you do it all at once. So just I will be doing that from now on like that. So the next videos are going to come up is finishing the deck, finishing the little parts of the framing, getting on to the wiring bit for the stereo system, which is super easy. You wouldn't believe it. And then eventually the reveal. On to other new upcoming projects, a few projects for the flat bottom, and then another reveal that if you were watching live not too long ago, you saw it. So a lot of cool things here in the upcoming months. We got a lot of good stuff going on. Thank you much, guys.